On a Saturday morning in Dayton, Ohio, Clara Jensen stopped at a neighborhood garage sale with only $10 in her pocket. Most tables were filled with old toys and chipped dishes, but one dusty painting caught her eye. It was only $5, so she bought it without thinking. As she carried it to her car, the frame felt loose. A strip of red thread stuck out from the back, and something hard shifted inside. She almost left it alone, but curiosity made her peel it back. What she found had been hidden for 50 years. Clara placed the painting on her small kitchen table, brushing off the dust. It didn't look valuable, just a faded landscape of a lake with trees. She almost laughed at herself for buying it. But the red thread bothered her. She picked at it until the backing began to peel away. Something stiff and rectangular slipped out. It was a bus ticket, faded but still legible, dated 1973. A name had been scribbled in pencil across the back. Clara froze, realizing she might be holding more than just junk from a forgotten garage sale. She flipped the ticket over again and again, tracing the faded ink with her finger. The name written there was Mary Ellis. Clara had heard that name before, but she couldn't place it. She pulled out her phone and searched. The first result made her sit back in shock. Mary Ellis had gone missing in 1973. Never found. Clara felt her pulse race. She stared at the painting, now more than just a cheap decoration. She wondered if she should call the police. But what would she even say? That a $5 painting held a missing girl's clue. That night, Clara set the painting against her living room wall and tried to ignore it. She made dinner and turned on the TV, but her eyes kept drifting back to it. She knew most people would laugh this off. It was probably nothing. But deep down, she couldn't shake the thought that she was holding something important. Clara wanted to dig further, but fear of sounding crazy kept her still. Her contradiction showed here. She noticed every detail around her, yet she constantly doubted her own judgment. The painting seemed to dare her to continue. The next morning, Clara finally gave in. She gathered a small knife and carefully pried away the rest of the painting's backing. The wood creaked as if resisting. Behind the canvas, tucked into the frame, she found a thin stack of papers pressed flat. Her hands shook as she pulled them free. They were postcards, yellowed with age. Never mailed. The writing was neat but urgent. Most were addressed to someone named Victor. Clara read the first few words and felt a chill. They spoke of secrets, of a plan, and of someone being watched closely. Clara spread the postcards across the table, arranging them in order. They seemed to be written by Mary herself, days before she vanished. The words hinted at fear. She wrote about someone following her home, someone she didn't trust. One postcard ended mid-sentence, as if cut off. Clara's chest tightened. These weren't random notes. They were cries for help. She knew she should take them straight to the police, but another voice told her to piece this together first. The contradiction returned. She trusted her eyes, but not her instincts, unsure if anyone would even believe her. Unable to resist, Clara searched old newspapers online. She typed, "Mary Ellis missing 1973 Dayton." Dozens of articles appeared. One headline read, "Teen disappears on way to bus station." Clara scrolled, comparing dates. The missing bus ticket she had matched the same day Mary was last seen. Clara leaned back, her heart pounding. Could these forgotten clues have been in that painting for 50 years? She felt the weight of it pressing down on her. Still, she hesitated. Bringing this forward might stir up pain for families or draw unwanted attention to herself. Clara decided to visit the public library, one of the few places still carrying physical archives. She pulled out microfilm reels and scrolled through old crime stories. Each image of Mary stared back, frozen in time. Clara whispered her name under her breath. She noticed something odd. One article mentioned a teacher named Victor who had been questioned but cleared. The postcards mentioned that same name. Clara scribbled notes. The lines between curiosity and obsession blurred quickly. She wasn't a detective, but now she felt like one, chasing pieces of a puzzle that no one else had finished. At home again, Clara studied the postcards under better light. She noticed faint pencil marks under the ink. Holding them sideways, she could see impressions of words written on top of each other, as if someone had tried to erase or cover them. With a flashlight, she revealed fragments of directions. A street name. A bus route. It looked like Mary had been trying to leave, but never made it. Clara shivered. She thought again about calling the police, but doubt crept in. What if they laughed at her? What if they thought she was just chasing shadows? Clara placed the painting and the postcards on her bed. Staring at them, she felt torn. Part of her wanted to lock them away and pretend she had never bought them. Another part wanted to keep pulling until the whole story unraveled. That night she dreamed of a bus pulling into a station. A girl waved from the window, her face pale. Clara woke with her heart racing, sweat on her forehead. The painting leaned against her dresser like a silent witness. It felt alive in the room, daring her to take the next step. By the third day, Clara could no longer ignore it. She carried the painting and the stack of postcards back to the kitchen. She laid everything out neatly, as if preparing evidence. The postcards mentioned Victor repeatedly. She wondered who he really was and why Mary had written about him. Clara traced the red thread she had first seen and realized it had been used to sew part of the canvas back together. It wasn't an accident. Someone had hidden these items with care, hoping they would be found by someone willing to pay attention. Clara decided to share what she had with her neighbor, Mr. Donnelly, who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. She carried over one of the postcards and the bus ticket. He adjusted his glasses and read silently. His expression hardened. "Where did you find these?" he asked sharply. Clara explained about the painting. Mr. Donnelly shook his head and told her she should leave it alone. "Some stories are better left buried," he muttered. His words unsettled her, but they also made her more determined. Why would he warn her so strongly? That evening, Clara sat with the postcards spread out again. She traced Mary's handwriting, the fear clear in every line. "Victor keeps asking questions," one read. "I can't tell anyone, not even my sister." Another card ended with, "If anything happens," but stopped there. Clara's mind spun. Victor had been real, but had he been guilty? She opened her laptop and looked for Victor's name tied to the old school records. Nothing came up right away. She wondered if she was chasing a ghost. Still, the words on the postcards felt too alive to ignore. Clara thought about going to the police again, but remembered her neighbor's reaction. He had been too quick to dismiss it. It made her suspicious. Maybe there was still someone alive who wanted this hidden. Clara decided to test a theory. She slipped one of the postcards back into her mailbox and waited. That night, she heard footsteps near her porch. When she checked in the morning, the postcard was gone. Clara's stomach turned. Someone else knew about these postcards, and they wanted them out of sight. The quiet suburban street suddenly felt dangerous. The next day, Clara returned to the old bus station mentioned in the postcards. The building was boarded up, abandoned decades ago. She pushed at the side door until it gave way. Dust and broken glass crunched under her shoes. In the corner of the main hall sat a rotting cardboard box. She pulled it closer and brushed off grime. Inside was a collapsed birthday cake box. Once pink and cheerful, scrawled on the top was handwriting she recognized. It matched Mary's. The cake box seemed out of place, a relic that whispered of something interrupted. Clara opened the cake box with shaking hands. Inside were scraps of paper, damp and unreadable, except for one corner that remained intact. It contained Mary's name, her birthday written neatly. Clara's chest tightened. The box had never been delivered. It looked like Mary had been planning to celebrate, maybe with someone, but never made it there. Clara held the ruined box like it carried a voice from the past. She took photos, documenting everything. She knew now this wasn't coincidence. The painting had been meant to preserve pieces of a story hidden for half a century. As Clara explored further inside the bus station, the lights suddenly flickered. She realized she hadn't brought a flashlight, only her phone. Then everything went dark. The power was out across the block. The silence pressed in heavy, broken only by the faint sound of a bell ringing somewhere in the distance. Clara's breath caught. She couldn't tell if it was real or imagined. She stumbled back outside, heart hammering. She didn't know if someone had followed her in, but she felt watched. The painting's mystery was no longer just about the past. It was reaching into her present. Back home, Clara locked the doors and sat on the couch, her heart still racing. She replayed the sound of the bell in her head. Maybe it was nothing, maybe just nerves. She pulled the postcards closer and read them again. The words about being followed felt heavier now. She whispered, "I believe you, Mary," as if speaking directly to the girl across time. It was a strange comfort, but it also made her realize how dangerous this was becoming. If someone was still protecting secrets from 1973, she might already have drawn their attention. The following morning, Clara forced herself to act normal. She went to work, did her errands, and tried not to think about the painting. But when she returned home, she noticed something was off. The painting had been moved slightly, leaning at a different angle against the wall. She lived alone. Her stomach sank. Someone had been inside her house. She checked the postcards, still there, but she could not shake the feeling that she was being tested, as if someone wanted to know how much she had uncovered. The painting's silence felt heavier than ever. Clara debated calling the police again. But what could she say? That someone had nudged a painting? It sounded ridiculous. Instead, she walked across the street to her neighbor's house, pretending it was just a casual visit. Mr. Donnelly seemed too calm when she mentioned Mary's name again. "That case is closed," he said firmly. "Don't dig into it." Clara noticed his hand tremble as he set down his coffee mug. He knew more than he was admitting. That alone convinced her. She had to keep digging, no matter what it cost her peace of mind. Quiet beat. That night, Clara sat alone at her window, sipping tea as the rain came down steady. She watched the water stream across the glass, tracing lines like paths that disappeared into darkness. She thought about Mary, who had once been a teenager full of plans and dreams, only to vanish. Clara realized she wasn't just curious anymore. She felt responsible. But the weight of it scared her. What if she was too late to make a difference? The contradiction gnawed at her. She noticed everything, but she doubted her power to change anything. Clara returned to studying the bus ticket. She noticed a faint number printed at the bottom, different from the others. It looked more like an address than a ticket code. Curious, she typed it into her phone. It matched a rundown part of town near the river. Her heart pounded as she compared the number to one of the postcards. The match was too precise to be random. She decided she had to go there, no matter what she might find. She packed a small bag, stuffed the postcards inside, and set out for the address. The address led Clara to the ruins of the old bus station once more. She circled the building until she found the spot mentioned in the faint writing. It was near a back alley where weeds grew through cracks in the pavement. She crouched and traced the wall with her hand until she felt carved initials. Me. Her breath caught. Mary had been here. It was proof, hidden in plain sight. Clara snapped a photo with trembling hands. She felt closer to Mary's last steps than anyone had in decades. The moment was both thrilling and terrifying. Inside the bus station again, Clara wandered deeper. She pushed past collapsed benches and piles of debris. In one corner, she spotted something metallic glinting faintly. She brushed away dirt and uncovered an old locker. The lock was broken, rust eating the edges. Inside lay a small tin box. She pulled it out, coughing from the dust. When she opened it, she found scraps of a note, badly damaged but still readable. The words, "Don't trust Victor," leapt off the page. Clara's hands shook. Mary had left a warning. The question now was, had anyone listened in time? Clara hurried back home with the tin box, her mind racing. She spread everything out on the table, the postcards, the bus ticket, the scraps from the box. The message was clear, but confusing. Mary hadn't trusted Victor, but the records had cleared him. Who was lying? Clara searched deeper online, uncovering a mention of Victor being a teacher at her old high school. He had suddenly quit the same year. Mary vanished. Clara felt a knot in her stomach. The threads all tied together, but they didn't form a picture yet. Only more questions piled up. Clara pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to calm down. She looked at the postcards again and noticed a faint watermark under the ink. It was the school's emblem. Mary had written these while still attending class, maybe even hiding them in her books. Clara felt a wave of sadness. A girl had tried to reach out for help, but no one had listened. Now, 50 years later, Clara was listening. She leaned back, staring at the painting that had started it all. She realized the story wasn't finished. It had only just begun. Clara decided she couldn't handle this alone anymore. She reached out to a retired detective she found mentioned in one of the old articles. His name was Frank Lawson, a man now in his 70s. They met in a small diner. She laid out the postcards, ticket, and scraps on the table. Frank leaned forward, his tired eyes scanning each piece. He admitted he had worked the case when young. Victor was a suspect, he said, but nothing stuck. He warned Clara that reopening this might stir old enemies who never wanted the truth exposed. Frank explained how the case had haunted him. Leads had vanished, evidence was lost, and pressure from higher-ups shut things down. He confessed that Victor's name had always lingered in his mind. Clara asked if he believed Mary had written the postcards. Frank nodded, saying the handwriting matched what little they had on record. But then his tone grew stern. If you keep going, you'll be pulling at threads people buried on purpose. Clara felt a chill. She wanted to stop, but she also knew she couldn't. She had already stepped too deep into Mary's story. Clara returned home, shaken but more determined. She placed the painting back on her table, staring at it like it held all the answers. She pressed her palm against the canvas and whispered, "Why me?" For a moment, she thought she saw faint letters beneath the paint. She grabbed a flashlight and angled it carefully. Words began to appear, faint strokes hidden under the image of the lake. She leaned closer and read, "Trust the postcards, not the faces." Clara shivered. It was a direct warning, painted into the art itself, left there to be discovered decades later. Her mind raced. If the painting itself carried hidden messages, then someone had deliberately sealed it with the postcards. That meant whoever painted it had known Mary. She searched for the artist's signature but found none. Clara dug through old art contest records at the library, desperate to find a clue. Eventually, she found a newspaper clipping of a young art teacher named Victor Hale. His work looked strikingly similar to the lake scene. Clara's stomach twisted. The man Mary hadn't trusted might have been the one to preserve her final words, hiding them inside the painting. Quiet beat. Clara sat in her kitchen that night, the postcards spread before her like puzzle pieces. She sipped coffee slowly, her hand trembling on the mug. She thought about Mary, a teenager writing desperate notes, and about herself, an ordinary woman pulled into a crime older than her own life. Was she helping or making things worse? She felt overwhelmed, wondering if her need to notice every detail was ruining her peace. Still, she couldn't walk away. She whispered softly into the quiet room, "I just want to know what really happened." Clara's search led her back to her high school archives. The dusty files smelled of old paper and glue. She searched through yearbooks until she found Victor Hale's photo, a young man with sharp features, dark hair, and piercing eyes. She froze. She had seen that face before. Her neighbor, Mr. Donnelly, bore the same jawline, though aged and softened. Clara's chest tightened as realization struck. Her neighbor wasn't just a bystander warning her off. He had been part of this from the beginning. His calm demeanor, his sharp reaction, it all made horrifying sense now. Her hands shook as she flipped through more yearbooks. Victor Hale had vanished from the records after 1973, the year Mary disappeared. Clara whispered his name out loud. The sound felt heavy in the silent archive room. She copied the photo with her phone and left quickly, her nerves raw. Outside, the air felt colder than before. She couldn't look at her neighbor's house without feeling dread. The man she had trusted to feed her cat once, to water her plants, might have been at the heart of Mary's disappearance all along. Clara returned home but couldn't bring herself to go inside. She sat in her car, staring at the glow from Mr. Donnelly's window. Every instinct told her to drive away, but she couldn't abandon her house or the evidence inside. Eventually, she forced herself to enter quietly. She locked the doors and placed a chair against the back door. Then she sat on her couch, clutching the postcards like a shield. Sleep refused to come. Every creak of the house felt like a footstep, every shadow like someone waiting. Clara knew confrontation was coming. By the following night, Clara's fear became reality. A knock came at her door just after midnight. Her heart froze. She crept toward the window and peered out. Mr. Donnelly stood there, calm, hands in his pockets. "We should talk," he said softly, as if he knew she was watching. Clara's breath caught. She stayed silent, hoping he would leave. Instead, he knocked again. Harder this time. The quiet suburban street seemed to hold its breath. Clara realized she couldn't run forever. She opened the door slowly, bracing herself for whatever truth he was about to reveal. Mr. Donnelly stepped inside with unsettling calm. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on the painting and postcards. "I told you to leave this alone," he said, his voice low. Clara felt small under his gaze. He moved closer, his presence heavy. "Mary's story wasn't meant for you," he continued. "It was meant to stay buried." Clara wanted to scream, but her voice stuck. The postcards shook in her hands. She realized then that the man who had lived across from her for years wasn't just a neighbor. He was the secret Mary had feared all along. He sat down like he owned the place, his tone almost gentle. "Mary wasn't supposed to run," he said. "She was supposed to stay." Clara froze. Donnelly's words twisted through her mind. He admitted he had been in love with Mary's older sister, and when Mary talked about leaving, it threatened everything. He had tried to stop her, to convince her to stay quiet. Clara's stomach churned. She realized she was staring at the man who had manipulated the truth for 50 years. His calm tone didn't soften the horror of what he confessed. Donnelly explained that the postcards were never meant to surface. He had hidden them to keep suspicion away from the family. "Victor was never guilty," he said firmly. "He was a scapegoat. I made sure of that." Clara's throat went dry. This was the revelation she hadn't expected. The supposed villain, Victor, had been innocent. Donnelly had woven a story that shifted blame and kept the truth out of reach. His motives, he claimed, were about protecting love. But in doing so, he had destroyed Mary's chance at safety. Clara realized the betrayal cut deeper than she imagined. Clara's mind spun. She thought back to the painting, the hidden words. Trust the postcards, not the faces. Mary had tried to warn anyone who found them. Donnelly leaned forward, his voice lowering. "If you hand these over, you'll only hurt people who don't deserve it. Let the dead stay buried." His words carried both a plea and a threat. Clara's contradiction boiled up inside her. She noticed every clue, every detail. But now she doubted her ability to act. She felt torn between protecting Mary's truth and fearing the consequences of exposing it. Clara stood, clutching the postcards tightly. Donnelly's eyes narrowed. "You think you're doing good," he said, "but you're going to destroy lives." Clara realized his confession wasn't about guilt, but about control. He had decided which truths were safe to share, which memories to erase. She looked at the painting again, the red thread that had started everything. She felt Mary's voice pushing her forward. Clara's fear began to shift into resolve. She might not be brave, but she could no longer ignore what she had uncovered. Silence had already cost too much. The next morning, Clara carried the evidence back to Frank Lawson. She laid it all out in his small, cluttered home. The retired detective stared at the postcards, the painting, and her neighbor's photo from the yearbook. His face hardened. "This changes everything," he said. Clara braced herself. Frank promised he would contact the police, though he warned it wouldn't be easy. Decades-old cases didn't move fast. Clara felt drained, but relieved. She had passed the burden forward, yet even as she left Frank's house, she felt eyes watching her, as if Donnelly still lingered in the shadows. The police reopened the case quietly, unwilling to announce it until they had proof. Clara kept her head down, avoiding Donnelly's house, though his curtains never seemed to close. Weeks passed, filled with interviews, evidence checks, and questions she struggled to answer. Finally, one evening, Frank called her. They had enough. Police cars rolled up to Donnelly's house. Clara watched from her window, her heart hammering. He walked out calmly, hands raised, as if he had been expecting this moment. Their eyes met across the street. His gaze wasn't angry. It was almost pitying, like she had failed to understand him. In the days after Donnelly's arrest, news spread quickly. Old headlines resurfaced, the story of Mary Ellis reappearing after 50 years. The community buzzed with shock. Families who had long buried their grief found themselves forced to relive it. Clara felt guilty for stirring so much pain, but also proud for finally giving Mary's voice a chance to be heard. She visited the library again, reading through the archives with new eyes. The word missing no longer felt like an unsolved mystery. It was a story that now had a name, a face, and a long-hidden truth. Clara attended a small gathering organized by Mary's surviving relatives. They thanked her for bringing forward the evidence, though their gratitude was tinged with sorrow. One woman, Mary's niece, hugged Clara tightly. "We never thought we'd know what really happened," she whispered. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. She realized the postcards hadn't just been scraps of paper. They had been a lifeline reaching across time, waiting for someone to listen. Clara had been that person. It was both an honor and a burden she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Weeks later, Clara returned to the painting. She decided not to sell it or hide it away. Instead, she donated it to the small Dayton Museum, where a corner was dedicated to unsolved and reopened cases. The staff placed the painting behind glass, the red thread still visible. A plaque explained its role in solving a decades-old mystery. Clara stood quietly before it, her reflection mingling with the faded lake scene. She whispered a silent promise to Mary. "You're not forgotten anymore." For the first time since buying it, she felt peace in letting it go. Still, Clara couldn't shake the memories. Some nights she dreamed of Mary standing at the bus station, waving goodbye. Other times, she dreamed of Donnelly's calm eyes watching her from across the street. The case was over in the eyes of the law, but not in her mind. She knew there would always be unanswered questions. Why had Donnelly hidden the evidence instead of destroying it? Why had he chosen her, of all people, to stumble across it? Clara realized some mysteries would never be solved, even after the truth had come out. One quiet morning, Clara walked past another garage sale in her neighborhood. Tables of worn-out clothes and cracked dishes lined the driveway. For a moment, she almost turned away. But then her eyes caught on an old stack of records, dusty and forgotten. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. She didn't stop this time. She had learned her lesson. Sometimes forgotten objects carried stories too heavy to bear. Other times, they were just junk. The trick, she realized, was knowing when to listen and when to let silence be enough. Clara's life returned to normal in some ways, but she was never quite the same. She walked more slowly past old houses, noticing the details she once ignored: a broken curtain, a cracked step. She wondered what stories each held. People told her she had done a brave thing, but she never felt brave. She just couldn't look away. That was her contradiction, her strength, and her curse. She had solved a crime, but it hadn't given her peace. It had only shown her that every object, every person might be holding a hidden truth. Months later, the museum invited Clara back for a small ceremony. They unveiled the painting in its new display, with Mary's postcards beside it. Visitors walked slowly past, whispering. Clara stood in the corner, unnoticed, watching people pause and read. She felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. This wasn't her story. It had always been Mary's. Clara had simply been the one to listen. For the first time, she allowed herself to let go of the guilt. She had done what she could. Mary's voice no longer echoed only in silence. It was heard. Clara walked home after the ceremony, under a pale evening sky. She thought about the 50 years of silence, about the people who had chosen to forget, and about the one girl who had tried to leave a trail. It struck her how fragile memory was. Without a painting, without postcards, without someone willing to notice, Mary would have remained just a name in an old headline. Clara realized she hadn't solved the crime alone. She had simply answered when history knocked on her door, refusing to let the story vanish forever. Standing once again at her kitchen window, Clara watched the street in quiet. The house across from hers was empty now, its curtains drawn for good. She sipped her tea and breathed slowly. The painting was gone, the postcards locked away, but their story remained inside her. The ending wasn't neat or perfect. It was bittersweet, filled with loss and truth, side by side. Clara understood now that some secrets never stay hidden forever. Sometimes they wait patiently for someone curious enough to notice a red thread dangling from the back of a painting.